Hey Barry, it's me Daniel. This is my Shaft reflection video. I'm in one of like the Wannik Science little like study pods. In one of those. And I'm gonna be like a little quiet because I don't know how like soundproof they are, but I gotta get this reflection video done, being as that it's like 2 days late. Also, let me tell you, these pods not built for with 6'4" people in mind. I am just a little too big for this. So wait, also sorry, all of this was just to explain that my framing of this video is weird. Anyways, so wait, I'm positioning. Okay, so I was like starting these off with just like how I felt about the movie. I loved Shaft. It was great. I think it was, I mean, obviously very well made. But what I liked about it was that it's like the type of movie that I would just like happen across and watch on like a weekday night. Like it felt very like it was just a cool movie. Um, Talking about how like specifically Gordon Parks' involvement in the movie. Because obviously he heavily involved. He directed it. Um, I think it's interesting how different it feels from the rest of his stuff that we've looked at. Um, because I mean, like, you take obviously A Choice of Weapons is kind of the biggest one. I feel like that we like get to experience his voice and kind of his stance on things because it's his like autobiography. Um, but then also in The Learning Tree, we get to see a lot of things the way he sees them. And it's interesting, I think, how violent the movie is, how violent Shaft is. Um, because I mean, it's realistic, or like, to a point, um, of like the times were violent times. But Gordon Parks seems he seems pretty against violence. Like it seems like he recognizes it as sometimes a necessary evil. But I mean, it's coming from the guy who was gonna rob somebody and instead sold him his knife. Like that's not a violent man. Um, and because most of the movie's not, it's not insanely violent. And then you get to the last like 10 minutes, just all out gunfight. Freaking oh, I need to remember the character's name. Ben. I think it was Ben. Yeah, the activist guy. He was great. Spraying people down with a fire hose. That was like that's insane. But so I don't know. Something about it didn't feel like it just didn't feel Gordon Parks. I thought it was great. I think it's very interesting that he worked on it. Um, because if you put that next to the other things that he worked on, I feel that it's pretty different. Which isn't to say I didn't like it or I didn't like the other thing, like the other things that he worked on. Because Learning Tree I thought was phenomenal. Um, it's interesting how different they feel, and they're both cool. I loved Shaft. I thought it was great, but so it seems like since he didn't write this one, it was written by Ernest Tidyman, who we're gonna talk about him because he's interesting. He's very interesting. But it was written by Ernest Tidyman. So I feel like even though Parks directed it, um, some of the stuff in the movie I feel like doesn't reflect his views and his opinions. And obviously I can't like that's me spitballing. I can't assign that to Gordon Parks. Um, but obviously I still think it's a good um representation of I mean you have Shaft is an incredible like is a well sorry that was a bit facetious. I was gonna layered character. He's like for the times that's a step in the right direction for sure. As far as an actual like methodical deep layered character, it's like it's like kind of there. I think he's a great character. I like him a lot. but there's like a couple things that are like, that's for sure a stereotype. Um, and we talked about that a bit in class. Of the Mandingo stereotype, how Shaft like he kind of fits in it a bit. Super, he does. Um, but then he also has, well, he doesn't. He's not a perfect mold of it because the Mandingo is often seen more like animalistic, and very brutal and like bestial. Shaft is more intelligent than that. Because I mean, he does like he's violent. He throws a guy out a window. Insane scene. But then he's a detective. He gets, or not. I don't actually know if that's like his official thing in the movie, but he's like kind of getting to the bottom of this. He's an intelligent character, which I feel that's important because at the time when Shaft came out, there weren't that many black representations of like very intelligent main like leading characters. Um, because even in like the good representations of um like black culture at this time, there's not like many. There's good representations. There's plenty. But there weren't many intelligent like representations of intelligent black men, which obviously a problem. That's why we're talking about it. Thinking even on like, I mean, like To Kill a Mockingbird is like your prime example of like oh, this is finally black people represented as not like a villain. They're like you know, there's not an intelligent black person in that. Like, I mean, Calpurnia, but she's. Anyway, sorry, that's like that was but no. So I think that's like it's very interesting. It plays into stereotypes, Chef does. And I think that's where it's obvious that it's written by a white man in the like 70s. Was it 60s or 70s? Wait, sorry, I forgot to look that up. Um I was actually so prepared. Okay, yeah, 70s. Um but so I do want to talk about Ernest Tidyman. Because obviously it's a black story. It's it's about black people. I think, I mean, primarily the entire cast is black except for like the police force. Which are very interesting characters. We'll talk about them. Don't stress. Um, and the way Ernest Tidyman wrote them is it was authentic to the time. It was how people talked and how they like acted. But like for him to like write some of that is like that's maybe pushing it. But I think it was important that he did write it. Obviously because it was like a step in the right direction for media representations. But I was reading up on Ernest Tidyman because we talked about him a little bit, but I thought he was very interesting. Because like watching Shaft, I had no clue that was written by a white guy. Um, well, sorry, I had a clue because you said it in class, but like I wouldn't have gathered that on my own. Um, but so he's from Cleveland, Ohio, and he grew up around a lot of black people. Um, and he said that like he recognized that they were kind of not kind of fully super misrepresented in the things that he was like watching, reading, whatever. Um, and he was like, those aren't like the people that I grew up with. They're just not represented anywhere. So he wrote Shaft about an intelligent black man, and a handful of other intelligent black men. I mean, Bumpy is. Um, Also, we're so going to talk about Bumpy. I loved him. Um, but so it's interesting to see a white guy in the back then, um, recognizing that black people are misrepresented because I mean, obviously, the black people know that they're misrepresented because like no one's representing them. Um, but for him as a like an outsider to recognize that and also to do something about it, I think that's very important, and I like that about him. I think that's cool. But back to the actual like the film. Um, I think so. My favorite character was Bumpy. He's cool. Because that's such an interesting. I almost felt like he was like a cooler, not cooler. That's a bad vocab word. But a more like profound representation than Shaft. Because he is a. I mean, he's a gangster. I think he's a crime lord, and he's based off the real gangster Bumpy. It's one of them's Bumpy Johnson, and the other one, I don't remember, but Bumpy, anyways. But he's based off a real guy, and he's layered. Like he's probably the deepest character in the entire movie. Um, because simultaneously he's like this kind of evil guy. No, yeah. He's not a good dude. Like we don't really get a full scope of maybe things that he's done, but he's like a crime lord. Um, but then his daughter gets kidnapped. Um, and obviously he just wants his daughter back. Like, hello. And so he's willing to, hire Shaft, who he ordinarily wouldn't, you know, rub shoulders with. But he's willing to hire her or him and to get his daughter back. It's I don't know. It's a very interesting portrayal, and then what I think adds to it makes it way more interesting. Because that's pretty interesting. Having like seeing on screen Bumpy crying, it like I don't know, because it robs him of some of his power of like, oh well, he's not like Darth Vader, this guy cries. Um but then you feel like connected to him because he's crying. So it was a very interesting, it was like I don't fully know how they want us to feel about Bumpy. I like him. Um but so I thought he was a great character. Ben was a cool character too. I liked him. He was a an activist, which is probably a good portrayal from like I'm sure there were a ton at the or I'm speaking like I don't know. I'd like looked up an article on this. There were plenty of activists at the time, so to have Ben in that movie and kind of like shoved in the spotlight, like for people to watch on a big screen, that was an interesting move by, well, I mean by Tidy Man and more by Parks. But to have him so prominent, and so that's like a great. I'd be curious to do more research as to how that specifically was received. Because we know Shaft, like the movie, very well received. And I mean pretty, like it's still talked about. Obviously, we're talking about it. Um, I think this was like another point in my head that I had to touch on. I was looking into like Gordon Parks' involvement in the film. Because I was curious, like if he didn't write it, like how is it a Parks film really? I mean, I know he directed it. I know he called the shots. But the most interesting thing to me that I found was I just held up a cheese necklace. I don't know. The most interesting thing to me that I found was he wanted it to be a black film. Because obviously John Shaft is a black character, but he wanted it to like the cast and the crew to primarily be black. Which at the time pretty like that's not normal. Um and it seems like he had to jump through some hoops to do this. Which is interesting. No, it's yeah. Because I mean, at the time, yeah, that makes sense. Like he had to jump through hoops to get that many, like, black people in one place. Town, like, yeah. There's gonna be pushback on that, but at this point in his career, he's established enough Like he's done enough things. People know he's like pretty sound, pretty stable. Um, so he did have enough pull to actually get like almost an entire black cast and crew. Very impressive. And I think that's one of the things that makes this like a black movie. Which is like that's great. Um, and because the representation in the movie phenomenal. Like we talked about that. It's pretty good. But I think seeing that also more as a filmmaker, but seeing that he had a very capable crew, and like composers too. Just like pretty much everyone involved in the making of this film was black. Um, that's very impressive that he was like able to pull that off. So I felt like I had to say that because at the time, like you do that now, that's like, all right. But back in the '70s, I'm sure that was like probably a feat to pull off. Um, so I think I respect that. That's awesome. Closing thoughts. I think Shaft. Trying to think if it's my favorite thing I watched or that we like watched in the class because I did really like the Learning Tree also. I think it. I think I like Shaft more though. Because there's just like the dialogue, man, so good, so '70s. So like, oh, just some of the things they say. Like, I remember thinking in my head I was watching this movie and I was like, shoot, I got to write that down, and then I didn't. So now I can't tell you what they said. But suffice it to say, good movie. Favorite one we've watched in class so far. And I am excited to watch Lead Belly soon. I think, yeah, we're watching Lead Belly next, so that'll be good. Thanks. Goodbye.